Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and for listening and watching to this stream. My name is Sylvan. I'm the host of the Swisspreneur show, Switzerland's largest business podcast, and it's my pleasure to have three fabulous guests here today to talk about the Basel Area startup ecosystem. First of all, we have Sissel Hansen on the top left of the screen. She is the founder and CEO of the Startup Guide, a media company that produces guidebooks, but also helps entrepreneurs to navigate and connect with different startup scenes across the world. Welcome, Sissel. Great to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Then we also have Lucas Sherdel on the bottom left. He is part of the Basel Area Business and Innovation team, the agency responsible for helping innovators and entrepreneurs finding business success in the Basel area. Also, a very well welcome to you, Lucas. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Sylvain. It's a pleasure to be here.
And then we also have Ilya Shumilin. He is the Open Innovation Manager at Keen Innovation, the innovation company of the Basel's Cantonal Bank and also the Bank Clear. Ilya, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting us here.
So today we want to talk about the Basel Area startup ecosystem, basically. And you know, when people talk about startups in Switzerland, they often refer to Zurich or to Lausanne, where both the EPFL and the ETH are situated, basically. But they often forget that there's also a very cool other location, namely in Basel Area. So I just want to know a bit more. You know, Basel is very well known for big pharma, Lucas. And is that from your perspective an advantage or a disadvantage for the Basel Area when it comes to startups and innovation?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Sylvain. That's a great question. Obviously, you know, if you know anything about Basel, then you know that it has two of the global top three pharmaceutical companies headquartered there. And they are two of the most innovative companies. They're recently listed in the top 50 innovative companies in the world by BCG. And what that means is that basically, the short answer to your question is that it's a huge advantage for the ecosystem, right? We have two of the globe's most famous and innovative companies which are headquartered there. And what that does is it creates a contribution to the ecosystem, which means that there's a heritage for innovation and an appetite for doing things in a new way, which kind of like filters down to the rest of the ecosystem and creates an environment for companies to do really well. So yeah, when we look at it on balance, it's a huge advantage for the Basel area to have that really global leading pharma ecosystem, which is based there. And by the way, that's an industry which is transforming really quickly. So the future looks really interesting and bright as well. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Absolutely. We'll definitely get to that. You know, if you look at the history of Silicon Valley, there was the semiconductors that basically laid the groundwork for innovation. Was there also any key moment in the history of the Basel area that basically shaped the future and sort of led to more innovation in the industry?
Sure, yes. So I'm not a historian, but I will try and give you some of the background on Basel. So yeah, I mean, Basel has a really strong history in its chemicals industry, right? And this is something that started when during the Reformation, there was a huge influx of silk dyers and traders that were dyeing silks that came to the city and the area. And what that means is that it led to a huge chemicals industry and a history of chemical engineering, which has really established itself as now Switzerland's, the home of Switzerland's chemicals industry. And through the ages, what we saw is that evolved into a biopharmaceutical and now a very, very world-leading biopharma industry and ecosystem. And so that, you know, what I say is that Basel is the Silicon Valley of Europe because of that ecosystem, right? Because of that heritage that it has. When we look at healthcare, we consider it to be the healthcare Silicon Valley of Europe because it has that exact same story to tell, and it has that really world-leading industry, which creates that kind of vibe around the city. So.
Fantastic! Thank you for taking us on that historic journey. That was a really great input there. You know, also there are, of course, you mentioned big pharma companies, but there are also some success stories from Basel area that go beyond the pharma. Can you talk a bit more about these success stories? Maybe also, beyond the pure pharma as an industry. I'm sure you also have performing startups and tech companies that are also established in Basel area.
Sure, yeah. I mean, well, there's two things that I would mention. One is that it's not just an industrial capital, right? It's also a cultural capital, and we consider Basel to be the cultural capital of Switzerland. So it has this amazing cultural history as well. Huge art scene, Fondation Balia, as well as kind of Art Basel, which is world famous, right? So it's not just an industrial capital. It also has a really cool cultural history as well. When we look at success stories of Basel, though, what we're seeing more and more of is that the rapidly growing startup scene, where we're seeing really, really cool companies coming out of the region and doing really well based on the success of the companies that are already based there, is becoming the success story of the area more and more today. So in the work that we do, we have some really promising success stories of digital health companies that have managed to capitalize on the great foundation of the area and do really well, and really prove that they can be competitors in both the Swiss and European market. So yeah.
Fantastic. We also had two guests that actually are from the Basel area recently in our podcast. One was Day Software, which was acquired by Adobe, and Adobe is still very much present in the Basel area, something that might be surprising to the outside, because usually after you acquire a company, you then move the IP and usually also the team to your headquarters, which would be in the US, but they decided to stay in Basel, which I think is a very strong sign and also a good reputation in terms of quality for the Basel area. And the other one was My Camper, an up-and-coming startup that also closed successful funding rounds and is really on the course of expansion. So I think here, from IPO to exit, which was the case with Day Software, to up-and-coming startups, I think Basel area really has a lot to offer that goes much further beyond pharma, as some people might just think from the outside. Now, I would also like to talk about innovation today, but before we do that, just a hint or a note to everybody listening or watching to this. If you do have any questions for any panelists here today, please post them in the comments, because if you do so, we can bring them on and answer them right here on the spot. So if there's anything that you ever wanted to know about Basel area or from the different people joining us here today, feel free to add them in the comments and we can actually address them right during the session. So now up next to you, Ilya, you are a part of the innovation ecosystem in Basel. So I just wonder what's happening in the area today. Can you actually, show us a bit more about what are the hot topics, what is in the pipeline from Basel area, what's currently going on, what's keeping you busy?
Well, I think probably I should start with innovation itself, because we are very deeply immersed into the world of fintech. And the reason why we actually are in Basel is because we are tightly connected to our founding banks, because we are part of Basel Kantonalbank Concern, which also includes Bankleer. And in the fintech, I would say that the fintech field is not much different from the rest of the country, but it's somewhat calmer here, because Basel is truly a place which is different from Zurich, from Geneva. It has its own vibe, and it has a very rich cultural heritage here. And in my opinion, Basel is basically as hipster as it can potentially get in Switzerland. It really is true, because when you see how people dress up here, that a lot of people are actually riding bikes there. It's the Berlin of Switzerland, basically. And I would specifically like to talk about innovation which goes beyond pharma, because of course Basel is known for its two giants, Novartis and Roche. They are very large employers here in the area, but in fact, I think there are a lot of companies that live in the shadow of those two big giants. Of course, they're major contributors, they're major taxpayers here, but we shouldn't forget about other companies like, for example, Talivile, which is traditionally Basel thing. It's a giant in fashion, and I think we shouldn't forget about them. There's also Vitra, the furniture, high-end furniture producer. And when I'm talking about Vitra, I would also like to mention that Basel Area is Basel Area. It's not just about Basel, because the book will also be focusing on, there are two cantons which are called Basel Land and Basel-Stadt, and there is also Jura. But what makes Basel truly special is something which is called, in German, it's called Dreiländereck, because the position of Basel is very favorable in terms of connecting to three nearby countries. It lies very conveniently close to the French border and to the German border. And Vitro is a good example of a company that is connecting to countries, because their head office is located in Basel, while their production site is located in Weil am Rhein, which is in Germany, and they have their big showroom there. And I think this particular feature has very much potential. So far, it's really hard to say how private companies can benefit from that, because one thing is Rhine. It's a river that gives life not only to fauna that lives in there, but also to companies that are surrounding the river and are working in the port. So it's quite interesting, I guess, for them to work in this particular space. So far, it's not quite clear how startups can benefit from that, but I think this favorable location can give future to some very interesting outcomes.
Absolutely. And what do you have in the pipeline in that regard? Are there any topics that you are especially bullish on and working on right now? Maybe also fintech or bank related?
Yeah, speaking of key innovation, we have actually, we exist officially from the beginning of 2019, and we were already launched quite a few digital products. One of them is a mortgage calculator. So it's called Hippo.ch, and that's something that we have built in order to help foreigners who reside in Switzerland to find out what they can actually afford and how they can actually become homeowners. Because when you come to Switzerland, it's quite you have to deal with a lot of new aspects of your life, and also the local laws are different. And we thought, okay, how can we make lives of foreigners simpler in Switzerland and in Basel as well? And we have built this mortgage calculator that is different from anything that exists on the market at the moment. We also have a couple of other products which are focusing on taxes, for example. It's called taxjungle.ch. It's a big map of Switzerland. Well, because taxes are a jungle, because Switzerland is a confederation which is comprised of 26 cantons and even more municipalities, which are parts of cantons. You pay taxes which could be very different from place to place. My neighbor living on the other side of the street could actually pay lower or higher taxes than I do, and that all depends on which municipality you belong to. And we also have a project about pensions in the pipeline, because pensions are another jungle, because it's usually is a problem for people to even understand why you need to save up for the future, because the fact that your retirement is an unforeseen event in a very distant future usually, and you start thinking about this when you're 55, and that's too late. And we thought, okay, there are a lot of people who belong to the same generation as I am, for example, millennials, and they don't like going to branches. They don't like making phone calls with banks. They would like to do everything online, and they would like to do their own research, their own desk research at home. So we've tried to create something which could be called the N26, if you know the bank or the Revolut of the pension, of the retirement systems, retirement calculators in Switzerland.
Absolutely.
That's like a couple of products in the pipeline.
Nice. What I'm also interested in is you studied in Russia, you studied in Germany, you worked across multiple countries in Europe. So what got your attention, or what was super appealing to you to then actually go and stay in Basel? Because you mentioned the strategic advantages that Basel offers to companies with the access to other nations in a short distance and everything. But what's appealing to you on a personal level? Why do you like Basel area so much?
Well, now we are going to talk a little bit more about very subjective experiences.
Sure.
So I have, like you've correctly mentioned, I've lived in Germany. I've actually studied in Germany, and I've spent a lot of time in Berlin. So when I got my first job opportunity in Switzerland, I was a little bit sad to leave Berlin, and for me it was important to find something which is as close to it as possible. And for me, Basel is a perfect thing in this sense. You really have a lot of small local places here, like local coffee breweries, people riding bikes, people driving, dressing up like crazy, and there are a lot of well, now it probably doesn't make sense to mention that, but before the pandemic started, there were a couple of very specific nightclubs here, which were more like Berlin style, which were quite interesting for me to visit, and also the proximity to the three countries, because when you live in Basel, you have an opportunity to go to Germany just like that tomorrow. You want to drink a beer in a beer garden, you just like take your bike or a car, and then in 5 minutes you're in a different country. I think that's, in terms of a very personal experience, it's something that makes life in Basel very special. And then the cultural heritage, of course, because people who live in Basel, they are very proud of their history and their cultural traditions. And I just must mention Basler Fastnacht. It's a big carnival that is happening here early in the year. Well, now it doesn't happen because of the pandemic, but still you have the spirit of that, of being part of a very strong community. The community sense is very important here. You feel feel like a part of something big here.
Nice. I also quickly wanted to ask Lucas and Sissel about that. Sissel, you probably have traveled across all the European tech hotspots. So I just wonder, how do you take note of Basel area? How do you realize it? Also, if you compare it to your hometown, Copenhagen in Denmark.
I have only been to the airport, unfortunately,
okay.
Because of Corona. I was not able to go yet, but I'm looking very much forward to go. But I think in general, I traveled a lot around in Europe, and I were in London, Switzerland as well. And I think exactly that I myself is from Scandinavia and Copenhagen. Everything that Ilya says resonate very much with the culture here. I think there is a bigger risk that you will be hit by a bike than a car. For sure, everyone is on bikes, and you just see now when the sun is shining here that people live in the city very much, right? And I think that this is a huge impact of where people decide to settle down and start their businesses, right? So a lot of people would ask me how can we build the best ecosystem for our entrepreneurs? And I say, well, there's only a certain much that you can control, and the rest is about the city itself and how people feel like living there. And I think that's also why Berlin became such a epicenter for tech in Europe, was because that it was a place that people flooded to, when they wanted to live there because of the uniqueness, right? You see, Berlin is not exactly like a big B2B. I think the biggest company there is actually the transport company of Germany. So it's just to give an example of that the city has a huge impact on where people are building their business. And I think one thing that I definitely think is an advantage for Basel is exactly that interconnection with the countries around it, right? So that you have a huge international scene as well, and that also just makes it easier for foreigners to settle. And I think the foreigners plays a big role in our ecosystem as well. So some few thoughts on that.
I like that takeaway or that learning. It sounds logical, but often we tend to forget that besides all the support programs that you can have for startups, the life quality is probably one of the most important things to attract the best talent, which is then in order the other important ingredient for building successful companies. So I think that's a really nice takeaway. Lucas, you also have an international background. You grew up in England, if I'm not mistaken. So what brought you back to Basel, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely echo what Sissel was saying there, and what you mentioned as well, is that I would really challenge anybody to find a city with better life quality than those that you find in Switzerland, and that includes Basel, right? When you are a 10-minute cycle from your office, when you walk down by the river, when life is very livable, when your salary is great and you can afford to live in a really comfortable place with great education for your children. There's really nothing that beats that, and it's something that Switzerland does incredibly well. So Basel is definitely at the top of that list, and is like consistently voted one of the top 10 cities to live as a place, as a livable, location for that reason. And then what I would add to that is, from my experience, and I'm probably going to get boring because I'll keep talking about digital health and healthcare today, is that I'm a complete nut, right, when it comes to health tech and healthcare. And there is such an amazing pool of people that work in Basel. Every single person you bump into works for a cool company, is doing a cool thing, has like a project that they've worked on, is an expert in the field, knows exactly what they're talking about. Everybody that you just like serendipitously bump into. And that's super impressive and so fun for somebody who's interested in the industry and is working in it. And you really can't beat that, right? When it comes to like getting embedded in like a place, being happy there, meeting friends, meeting people that you're interested in, and also like building companies, because that means that when it comes to building companies, you have this really huge pool of talent that you can choose from, people with great experiences who've worked on these big global projects, who are able to bring that experience to you. So super impressive place, I would say.
Awesome. I think people just now, they have to book a train ticket or a plane ticket once that's possible again, and just go and live the Basel area experience themselves. So Ilya, I quickly want to go back to the innovation landscape. So you are one key player with keen innovation, but who else is there in the Basel area? Who are other key players in terms of innovation in the Basel area?
Well, actually, I think it would be quite interesting to mention a couple of really small companies, because when we were working on a startup guide, and I at some point got the list of all the little startups which are working and active in the area here, I was super surprised about how much more actually is going on here, which I didn't even imagine. Like, for example, there's a company that is producing a baby translator. Like, if you have a baby and you would like to understand what your baby is talking about, then you can actually have this device and it will be telling you, like translating, like, I don't know, like how, well, if it actually works or not, but the idea is super cool. It generates a lot of attention. There are e-harp producers, like people who are playing harp, like this musical instrument. They're like making an e-harp here. And there's an amazing place which is allows you, Switzerland is the country of not only chocolate and cheese, but also watches. And in Jura, that's the third canton in Basel area, there's a company that allows you to participate in a workshop, and you will assemble your own Swiss watch there. I think that's like really amazing. That's when they take the core of the country, and they let you be part of it. Because assembling a watch, you think, okay, if I want to make my own watch, I probably need to study this since I'm a child. I need to be a real professional in this field. But then they tell you, okay, that's not that difficult. You can do it yourself. And I think there are actually many more companies which are, of course, working in the field of life sciences, which are tightly connected to Roche, because you need to have a lot of financing. You cannot do this as your garage startup. Well, I don't think that will be entirely legal. But when it comes to technology, to IT, there are so many interesting things, and also something which is related to agriculture. There is a couple of startups which are, for example, doing, like one of them allows you to grow mushrooms using coffee waste. It doesn't sound like it's something that everyone would do on a daily basis, but I would try it just for the sake of trying. And that is something which makes Basel, I think, very special, because it's a small place. It's not like in Berlin. You move to when you move to Berlin, you don't even know where to start. I know a couple of people who moved to Berlin, and then they've lived there for 2 years, and they're still like not doing anything, because there's just like so many distractions. But Basel is very focused on a very small area, and you pretty much know everyone. When you go like to a meeting, you already see people who know someone who you met before, and I think that's something which is really.
I think we just lost him, so I'm just going to move on. Sorry, Ilya, I think we just lost you for a second. Yes, but you're back now. That's all good. So one follow-up question that I wanted to have on.
Yeah, so I just want to.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to contribute to what Sissel and Lucas have said about the support that you get in Basel, because when we actually started thinking about the idea of startup guide, I was really surprised how collaborative the local government was, because I thought that if you go to the government and you tell them, okay, we have this idea of doing a book that will take like 3 years to get approved, but they were like, okay, let's do it. It didn't take them months of internal negotiations, and they are very, very supportive to actually when it comes to development of the local startup hub.
Nice. That's really great to hear, and that's also something that a lot of people from abroad are usually surprised about. That also here, as a startup founder, if you intend to sell your company or you plan to do an acquisition of another company, that you can actually go to the tax authorities in Switzerland. You can talk to them in exchange and say, look, this is about how we actually plan to do it. What do you think? Is that possible? And then you can even get a tax ruling where they then say, yes, this is what we agreed on upfront before you execute anything. And then you can really go and have the best tax advantage strategy signed by the tax authorities that you can then actually execute. And I think that's another really powerful example about how the government is supportive and helpful in many ways, I guess, much more than you would probably expect from the outside. So I have one follow-up question for you, Ilya, the last one. When it comes to fintech or also banking in general, I can imagine that a lot of competition also goes to Zurich, to Geneva, but also to Germany, probably. Frankfurt is also not that far away. And I just wonder, did you experience any difficulties in attracting the best talent due to the other hotspots that are pretty close to you in that regard?
At Keen Innovation, I do not think we have ever experienced any problem attracting the best talent, because again, the favorable location of Basel allows us to also hire people which are so-called Grenzgänger in German. It's people who live either in France or in Germany, and they do their day jobs in Basel. So we actually I think we've never experienced any need to go to any other places, because you can source all the talent locally here. So I wouldn't say that is the main problem. The problem usually arises, but that's the case for the whole Switzerland. If you would like to hire talent from very far abroad, so-called third states, then you have to go through a very through a very complex hassle related to permit issues. But when you're located in Basel, you benefit not only from hiring people from Switzerland itself, but also from the surrounding countries, from nearby countries, because the legislative nature of Switzerland makes this possible.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's an extremely important point that you just mentioned. Basically, the third state employment is so difficult. I think there's definitely room for improvement, and I hope that Switzerland can solve that in the very near future. So just before we continue with the next question, just one last reminder, if you do have any questions, please post them in the comments so we can address them either during the session or at the end of it. So make sure to think about anything you want to ask the panelists today so we can also address it in today's session. So Sissel, now I of course also want to talk about everything startup guide related. You did extensive research with your team about the Basel area, and I just wonder, what are some surprising findings that you made?
Well, I think Ilya said a lot of it. I think the diverse range of companies, because like when we started, we were very, colored by exactly the history of the place and the whole biotech and health tech but I think what we realized was that there was so much more to it than that. And you mentioned some of the companies, but also I think what is very interesting is also, a good example is of course that Vitra is there, right? But you definitely see that the design focus of many of the companies is very present, right? And it is something that we actually can see a difference from the different hubs that we go to, that what is emphasized in the values of people from that location. So I think that, and then just, that there was so many different niches that you would never have thought of that would be covered, right? And then I also, we are actually just finishing our second book for Luxembourg as well. And there we were again, that a huge influence of that book is also, again, the connection, with all the surrounding countries and the huge international scene there, and trying to make it very easy and accessible for people to make a company, so you can attract people, attract talent. And I think I got parts of the same vibe from Basel area as well. And it's something that I think is also a little bit different from some of the other cities that we also have covered in Switzerland, since we did our impact guide last year for Switzerland. It came out January, just before the pandemic, to the World Economic Forum. And I think there we realized that something, and because Switzerland was also the first country that we ever did an impact guide for, basically looking at like the impact ecosystem, so investors, accelerators, so on, and with a huge collaboration with impact hubs, so the 7 different impact hubs in Switzerland. And I think that that's also something that, again, shines through in the Basel area book as well. And I think that that's something that, Switzerland is in a unique position where there is a lot of money, there is a lot of foundations, there's a lot of long-term money as well. And I think you can definitely see that in the companies coming out from here. So I'm looking forward to explore it more. But again, we are in the very early stage of the project. So there's not so much more that I can say than that.
Sure, but I think it's a very good start. You also mentioned the similarity to Luxembourg. Is that basically the trade of the small countries, that they do have to cooperate and to reach out to other countries around them to actually have a significant impact? Or is that something that you also see it happening in larger countries? Or is that really the small country vibe that they know, hey, we have to do that, otherwise we're not going to succeed anyway?
Yeah, I definitely think that it is this collaboration DNA, right? That that you're not big enough on your own, so you have to make sure that you collaborate with the people around you to become big enough to stand the competition as well. And then I think that that's something we see a lot in smaller ecosystems as well, that they are way more collaborative than that the ecosystems that are kind of like more like medium size, where you can see that there is a lot of competitions going on in the ecosystem because it's not big enough as Berlin, where it's, the market is big enough as well, right? So I think that Basel area is still this ecosystem where it's very much pay it forward and supporting the different initiatives, and again, collaborating across borders as well.
Got it. And I know you're still early in the process, but maybe you already see some things that are going well and that can also need some improvement from your perspective, especially also in comparison to other guides and reports that you did. So from your perspective, what is going on, like what is going well in the Basel area, and what, from your perspective, where do you see room for improvement, basically?
It's very difficult for me to say where there's room for improvement. I think we need to get a little bit further into the project to be able to see that. I think one thing maybe is that we need to make sure that Basel stands out besides the other Swiss cities, right? Like, how can we ensure that this is like, how can we ensure that people know that there's a big carnival going on as well? That's something that could be happening for people to actually visit there, because again, both private life and work life are very interconnected in some way, right? Yeah. So that could be one thing. I think that what is super interesting is exactly this, diverse scene that we definitely need to highlight very much in the book, and make sure that when people get the book, that they see the diversity of the startups ecosystem there. Of course, highlight still what it's known for, the whole biotech and health tech society, and treasure that, but also, again, as Ilya says, that there's so much more to it than that as well.
Got it. So yeah, then we stay tuned for the actual startup guide release to then learn more about what's going well and what can still have some improvement. Sure. I'm also very much interested in the future, not only the startup guide release, but also what you actually expect from the Basel area in the future. And I would like to start with Lucas here. So are there any topics or also predictions that you're keen to make? Where does Basel area head into the future? What do you think will happen over the next few years? Anything in particular that comes to mind, or anything that you're especially excited about? I think you have to also unmute yourself first, sorry. Oh, or leave the stream. let's switch then to Ilya first for that question.
Well, I would actually like to hope that the launch of Startup Guide Basel Area would actually attract a lot of entrepreneurs from all over Switzerland and the world to come to Basel and develop it further. I think we will see more startups obviously emerging in various fields here, because we have not, again, just pharma, but many other local companies that will probably in 5 years grow into something bigger. Some of them will become, out of unicorns, they become the whales. But I also think that people potentially should look into more into surrounding areas, and we have a little black ship here, which is called Jura. That's the third canton. It's actually, in fact, the newest canton of Switzerland, which appeared just a couple of decades ago, and I think it actually has enormous potential. Just like in America, like now those big entrepreneurs are fleeing Silicon Valley and they go to Texas. I think Jura is a pretty interesting location. While taxes are still high there, real estate prices are very, very low. So what you can afford here in Basel would be, a one-room apartment. You can buy like a big farmhouse in Jura. And I think that could be very, very attractive to people who would like to relocate here with their families. And like was correctly mentioned before, taxes are not always a problem, because if you have a really good idea, if they will see you as a very good, interesting prospective taxpayer, you'll negotiate your own deal.
I like that a lot. I think it's also with the pandemic, we basically saw that we can all work remotely. And I think in that regard, that makes that setup even more attractive. Close to the city, but still in the countryside with a lot of space, quiet, time for family, and affordable pricing. I think, that's something we definitely watch out for in the future. Lucas, you're back. So we just wanted to know about your future take. Where do you see Basel area is heading? What are you particularly excited about for the next few years?
Yeah, sorry about that. I think I got so excited that I pressed the wrong button, because this is actually my favorite question. I am really excited about the future of where it's going, because what we saw when COVID hit is that the digital health and healthcare market accelerated 10 years in 10 weeks, right? You just saw like this revolutionary change that we've been waiting for in healthcare for such a long time, because it's such a slow-moving industry. And so we suddenly saw this huge increase in adoption, utilization of telemedicine, digital tools when it comes to healthcare, massive increase in investment in biopharma, massive increase in appetite as well for innovation when it comes to healthcare and biopharmaceuticals. And what that means is that when we look toward the future of healthcare, those locations that have this magic mix of being established leaders in both biopharma and technology will do incredibly well, right? So what we'll see over the next 2 or 3 years is that locations like Basel, like London and Munich, which have that magic mix of those two things that I spoke about, will really ascend to be hubs, global hubs and leading tech hubs for the future. And Basel has all of the ingredients to make that happen. Right? There's literally nothing that will hold it back. And it also has the things that Sissel and Ilya were talking about, which is that massive and well-established funding scene, which is one of the leading ones in Europe. It has the market access to the neighboring countries in France and Germany. And it also has this life quality and this ability to live there, which way exceeds anything that you could get in London, and way exceeds anything you could get in San Francisco, for example, which is just now becoming impossible to live and unsustainable. So my prediction for the future is that Basel will ascend to be one of the global hubs when it comes to digital health. And I'm really excited about being a part of that and making that happen through our work.
Awesome. Yeah, I can tell why you pushed the wrong button. That excitement is fantastic. So Sissel, maybe it's still too early for you to make any predictions, but I'm sure one thing you're particularly excited about is the release of the startup guide for the Basel area. So please tell us a bit more about when that's happening and what we can expect from it.
Well, it's coming out in the autumn. So basically, I think what is the startup guide is a book, right? So it's also a snapshot of the ecosystem in that moment. And what we already can see is there's a lot of traction going on. And I think exactly what we can see, we have published guides in more than 50 different ecosystems around the world, right? And it's so, I think what is actually the most interesting is to publish the guide and then come back a year after and see what have happened. And then just see how fast these things are improving. And I'm totally with Lucas on the similarities to an ecosystem like Munich, right? Where we actually were able to do 2 guides already and see the development from around like 17 till 2019 when we did the second book. And so much have happened. And I think especially this combination of, big established corporations, the universities and the academia scene, good founding grounds like foundations and so on, and then the living quality. And that all together is an amazing mix for attracting the right talent and to build the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I think that is then my last thoughts is like, I think what we see is when an ecosystem is very mature is when the potential founders have exited a company from there and are coming back and start reinvesting into the ecosystem, right? So that you have this life cycle of entrepreneurs and the knowledge and this emotional attachment and loyalty that these successful entrepreneurs have to the ecosystem. And I think that wave are yet to come, and that's going to be really interesting to see.
Awesome. There's one last thing that I would like to try with all of you. We usually do some rapid fire questions at the end to wrap things up in our podcast episodes. So I would like to do that in a similar way. I just give you a question or a selection, and then each of you can do a short answer one by one. Are you up for that?
Sure.
Perfect. So the first one is, how many hours of sleep did you get last night? Do you want to start, Sissel, then Ilya, and then Lucas?
Yeah, I think I got good 8 or 9 hours.
Perfect. Wow.
Yeah, don't have any
Ilya?
kids yet.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I usually do 8, but last night it was 7. Yeah.
Lucas?
And I did 8 as well, which is very impressive for me. It's usually sometimes more around 5 or 6, but I had a good night last night, so it's a good day to ask.
Perfect. Then if you had to choose one city, of course, Basel, London, Zurich, or Copenhagen, or Moscow. Sorry, that's a lot of to choose from, basically. Sissel, you want to go first again?
I'm totally biased, like I have to choose Copenhagen. I'm still in love with my city, so.
Sure. Ilya, now I'm very curious with your international background. What do you choose?
Well, I chose Moscow by birth, but I made a conscious choice to go to Basel, and I would make this choice again.
Wonderful. Lucas, what choice is it for you?
I'm going to have 2 choices, even though that might not be allowed, and I will choose London because it's my home, and then secondly, I will choose Basel because it's my place of work. So.
Perfect. And the last question, do you have any favorite song that you have on repeat at the moment? Sissel?
Clearly not. Otherwise, it will come to me, right? No, I don't think so. I'm listening very much to podcasts right now, so
cool.
So no.
Anything you can recommend there?
Podcast-wise, yeah. Like right now, I'm listening to a podcast about the Wind of Change song and what influence it had on the Cold War. It's quite interesting.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ilya, do you have any song on repeat at the moment?
Well, I guess that won't be a surprising answer. I have some really hardcore Berlin techno on repeat, also in my car when I go to work and from work, and that is related a little bit to my travel experience. You can move out of Berlin, but Berlin cannot move out of you.
Nice, well said. Lucas, what about you?
Mine is very embarrassing. So mine is I just pulled out my Spotify so I could tell you exactly the name of the song. So I'm doing free advertising here. It's called Friday, Feet, Mufasa, and Hype Man. And it's from the TikTok video where the guy is dancing next to the car.
Nice.
I highly recommend it. It gets you ready for the weekend, and Friday today, so it's perfect. So.
Sounds good. Sounds like a good timing. So yeah, I think that's a wrap. Is there anything else you want to add or anything that we haven't talked about yet from your side? You all seem happy and quiet.
Yeah.
Bottom line, move to Basel.
Exactly.
Absolutely. No, I think
Ilya's
the key learnings, I mean, there were some really surprising learnings here. First of all, I think really don't underestimate the quality of life for attracting the best talent, and Basel definitely offers that, the whole Basel area. Then also, there's still some room for improvement when it comes to third country immigration visas or work visas to make that process faster and easier. And then last but not least, there's a lot more happening or going on than we would probably anticipate from the outside. So we're really looking forward and curious to read more about that in the upcoming startup guidebook about the Basel area. So thank you all so much for joining, and whoever would like to, give you a follow or get connected on LinkedIn, you can probably find all of us on LinkedIn and also all of our organizations. So stay connected, reach out if you do have any questions. And I wish you all a very happy week. And thank you so much for joining. And I'm going to end that stream. And thank you again for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.